You ever find yourself talking to your toaster or catching your reflection and thinking, did I really just wear pajama pants, cowboy boots, and a bathrobe all day and like it? Yeah. Welcome to the quiet, quirky, unexpectedly powerful world of living alone as an older person. Now listen, people think they know what it's like. Oh, you must be lonely, they say. Or bet it's nice having the TV all to yourself. But the truth? It runs a lot deeper than that. And nobody really tells you what happens when the noise fades and you finally get to hear your own thoughts again. So today, I want to walk you through 10 surprising truths, things that only reveal themselves when you've lived alone long enough for the silence to start talking back. Make yourself a cup of something warm, pull up a chair, and let's talk. Number 1. Your inner voice gets louder and wiser. Now, here's a surprise no one really warns you about. The moment you start living alone, there's someone in the room who just won't shut up. You. And not your regular voice either, not the one you use when you're chatting with your neighbor or ordering tea. No, I'm talking about your inner voice, the one that used to get drowned out by the hum of life. The one you forgot existed somewhere between raising kids, working jobs, and being pulled in 10 different directions. At first, it can be a bit much. You'll be making a sandwich and suddenly hear yourself say, "Why do I always cut the bread diagonally? Mom used to do that. I miss her. I never told her enough how good her grilled cheese was." And just like that, you're back in 1973, in her yellow-tiled kitchen, with Fleetwood Mac playing in the background. That's what happens when the noise of the world finally turns down. You hear the echoes of your own history. And yes, sometimes the voice nags. It might remind you of a past mistake or poke at old regrets. That's okay. Let it. That's part of the process, but stick with it long enough, and that voice softens. It becomes less like a critic and more like a companion. It starts to tell you the truth, not the dramatic, shame-soaked stuff, but the gentle truth. The kind that says, you did your best, or you've come a long way, or even, you're allowed to rest now. I know one man, Harold, 73, widowed, leaves alone with his golden retriever Daisy. He told me once, "After Linda passed, I realized the loudest voice in the house was the one in my head, and she wasn't always kind. But now, after a few years, we're on better terms. She's a bit of a smart aleck, but she's honest, and she keeps me good company." So don't be afraid when the voice gets loud. That's just the beginning. Over time, you'll hear wisdom you didn't know you had. And in the stillness, you'll find someone you actually like being around, yourself. 2. You might develop a quirky system for everything. You know you've been living alone for a while when your sock drawer starts to look like a color-coded library. I mean it. Living alone turns you into an absolute wizard of personal systems. And it starts out innocently enough. You lose your keys one too many times and you say, "All right, I need a spot. One spot. Keys go here." But then it spreads. Soon, the mail has its own tray. The batteries are alphabetized. Don't ask me how, it just happens. Your favorite teacup leaves exactly 1 inch to the left of the sink, and no other cup is allowed in that spot. It's not about being fussy, it's about peace. When no one else is sharing the space, you start to shape it around your own flow. You know exactly where everything goes, and everything goes where it makes sense to you. I remember visiting a friend, Eleanor, 76, sharp as ever. She had this little notebook labeled Operation Manual for My Brain. Inside, a handwritten list of where she keeps spare light bulbs, how to reboot the router, and which of her 4 TV remotes actually works. She laughed and said, "If I die, at least someone will know how to turn the Netflix on." That's the kind of thing no one tells you about solo living. It's not just surviving, it's engineering your own private universe, and it's oddly comforting. There's beauty in those little systems. They may seem silly to others, but to you, they're acts of self-care. A way to make your day run smoother, to save energy, to feel prepared when life throws one of its usual curveballs. And let's be honest, there's nothing quite as satisfying as opening a drawer and knowing exactly what's in there. It's like winning the lottery of adulting. So yes, maybe you have a spoon drawer organized by function. Maybe your closet is separated into church clothes, gardening clothes, and nobody's seeing me today clothes. That's not eccentric. That's mastery. Living alone doesn't mean living in chaos. It means designing life around what works for you. And once you've got that system humming, you'll wonder how you ever lived any other way. 3. You'll realize how often people talk over you when they're not there. This one took me by surprise, I'll be honest. When you start living alone, there's a strange kind of quiet that sets in, not just around you, but inside you. At first, it feels like freedom. No one interrupting your stories, no one finishing your sentences like they're trying to win some kind of conversation race. But then one day, it hits you. You're mid-thought, maybe reading an article or just sipping tea, and you remember something you were once trying to say and didn't get to finish. Maybe at a dinner party 5 years ago, or during a phone call with your sister. You paused, someone else jumped in, and the moment passed. And now here you are, 5 years later, still holding on to that unsaid thought like a folded letter in your pocket. I had a moment like that a while back. I was making a sandwich, nothing fancy, just ham and cheese, and out of nowhere, I remembered this story I once tried to tell at a family cookout about my first job in high school. I barely got 3 words in before someone said, "Oh yeah, I worked at the mall too." And the story just vanished. That memory came back, and this time, I told the story anyway, out loud, to no one in particular, just me and the sandwich. And it felt good. Not because anyone was listening, but because I finally let it live. Living alone teaches you something powerful. You start to listen to yourself in a way you never did before. You notice the pauses, you hear your own stories again, and you realize just how often you used to go unheard. Not because people didn't care, but because life was loud and fast and full of voices louder than yours. Now, you get to speak. Freely, fully, even if it's just to yourself. And friend, there's something deeply healing about that. 4. The fridge becomes a reflection of your mental state. You want to know how someone's really doing? Don't ask them. Check their fridge. I'm telling you, that little humming box in the corner of your kitchen becomes a mirror of the soul when you live alone. It sounds silly. Fridges don't lie. They just quietly expose the truth. I remember a stretch of 2 weeks when I was feeling off. Couldn't really put my finger on it. Just a little dull, a little disconnected. One night, I opened the fridge looking for something comforting, and all I found was a bottle of mustard, half a wilted lettuce, and 3 containers of takeout I didn't remember ordering. That fridge didn't just reflect my grocery habits, it reflected me. Now, when I'm feeling grounded, my fridge looks different. There's fruit in there, real vegetables, a little chicken soup I made from scratch because I felt like nurturing myself. The kind of food that says, I'm worth the effort. I'm not the only one either. There was a comment I read from a woman in her late 60s who said, "When my fridge is empty, it means my heart's a little empty too. When it's full, I know I'm loving myself again." Isn't that the truth? Sometimes the fridge tells on you before your words do. So if you're ever wondering how you're holding up, don't look in the mirror. Open that fridge door. And be gentle with what you find. Maybe all you've got is cheese slices and soda. That's okay. It just means it's time for a reset inside and out. And let's be honest, sometimes just buying a fresh bunch of grapes feels like a victory. A reminder that you can still take care of yourself, even in the quiet. 5. You'll have conversations with the past and make peace with it. There's something about living alone that invites the past to come knocking, not in a spooky, ghost story kind of way, but in a quiet, familiar way, like an old friend dropping by unannounced. At first, you don't know whether to let them in or pretend you're not home, but eventually, you open the door. I had one of those moments not long after my birthday. I was sitting by the window watching the rain, and out of nowhere, a memory bubbled up. A fight I had with my brother. We were both younger, proud, stupid, said things we didn't mean. He passed away years ago, and we never really got the chance to fix it. That afternoon, I just sat there, remembered the sound of his laugh, the way he used to drive with one hand on the wheel and the other tapping along to some old country song. And I said something I never got to say. "I'm sorry, man. I miss you." Just like that, to the rain, to the air. And you know what? It didn't feel weird. It felt right. Healing doesn't always need an audience. Sometimes it just needs space. That's what solo living gives you. Space to remember things fully. Space to revisit moments you pushed down for years because you were too busy, too distracted, or just not ready to deal with them. You start having these little internal conversations with your younger self, with a parent who's gone, with the friend who broke your heart or the one who saved it. You say things you should have said. You let go of things you've carried too long. One older man I met during a community walk said it best. "When I started living alone, I realized I hadn't just been avoiding other people. I'd been avoiding myself. But now I talk to the past every morning, and we're finally getting along." And sometimes those conversations bring tears, sometimes laughter. But more often than not, they bring peace. 6. You'll discover the joy of dressing for absolutely no one. One of the most underrated freedoms of living alone? You get to dress like nobody's watching, because guess what? Nobody is. I'm not saying you let yourself go. I'm saying you let yourself be. You know that one ratty t-shirt from the 80s concert you went to with your ex? The one with the tiny hole in the armpit and the ketchup stain shaped like Idaho? That shirt becomes your uniform. And it feels better than anything you ever bought at a department store. There's something liberating about waking up and thinking, what do I feel like wearing today? And not worrying about what anyone else will think. You can wear socks that don't match, or pajamas till 3 p.m. You can pair your Sunday best with your gardening hat if it suits your mood. No rules, no judgment. I remember walking into the kitchen one morning and catching my reflection in the toaster. I had on plaid pajama pants, a Hawaiian shirt, and my late wife's bathrobe over it all. Looked like a confused tourist at a nursing home luau. And you know what? I laughed. Out loud. Because I felt comfortable. And alive. When you dress for no one but yourself, something shifts inside you. You stop asking, "Do I look okay?" and start asking, "Do I feel like me?" And that question, my friend, is a doorway back to joy. 7. Unexpected objects become emotionally significant. Living alone teaches you that the heart attaches itself to the smallest things, not the fancy stuff, not the new chair or the expensive watch. I'm talking about the beat-up mug with the chipped rim, the cassette tape with no label, the slightly crooked painting you hung in 1993 and never bothered to fix. These things, they become memory holders. I have this old spatula, bent, stained, half melted on one corner, but it's the one my wife used to flip pancakes every Saturday morning for 40 years. I still use it. I could buy a new one, sure. But this one? It feels like her. I knew a woman, Dorothy, who kept a broken lamp by her reading chair. Didn't even work anymore. But she said it reminded her of the nights she and her late husband sat there reading aloud to each other, even when their eyes weren't so good anymore. That lamp became her lighthouse in the living room, and there's no shame in that. These objects, they carry the echoes of love, routine, and laughter. They remind us of who we were, who we've loved, and what we've survived. They aren't just things. They're time capsules with souls. Living alone gives you the time and space to see the value in what others might overlook. And that, in itself, is a quiet kind of grace. 8. You'll become an expert at eavesdropping on nature. Once the human noise fades, no kids running through the house, no spouse calling out from the other room, no neighbor's dog barking through the walls, you start hearing something else. Life. Not the big, flashy kind, but the soft, persistent kind that lives in the trees, the breeze, the rustling of leaves across your porch. I never used to notice it. But now, I hear the difference between morning birds and evening birds. I know when the wind is carrying rain or just showing off. I've got a squirrel in the yard who taps on the fence post at the same time every afternoon. I call him Larry. We're not friends, but we've got an understanding. One evening, I sat on the porch for nearly an hour just listening to frogs argue in the distance. I laughed to myself and thought, this is my new Friday night show. And I didn't miss the noise. Not one bit. You start to tune in. Nature becomes your background music, your calendar, your neighbor. There's something humbling about realizing how much has always been going on outside your window while you were too busy rushing around to hear it. And now you notice. Now you appreciate. Now you belong to it, in a way you never did before. 9. You might start talking to objects. And that's perfectly fine. Let me tell you something that would have made me laugh 20 years ago. I now have full-blown conversations with my coffee maker, and I don't mean muttering a quick, "Come on, hurry up." I mean actual dialogue. "Okay, old friend," I say every morning, "let's try not to explode today, all right?" And if it brews smoothly, that's my boy. You still got it. Now, if you'd walked in on me doing that before, I might have been embarrassed. But these days, I just smile and keep talking. Because here's the truth most people don't understand. When you live alone for a while, the silence doesn't stay empty. You fill it with rhythm, with comfort, with a little bit of yourself. Some folks talk to their plants. I know one lady, 84 years old, who greets every single one of her houseplants by name. She says good morning to Fernie, talks about the weather with Geranium George, and even apologizes to them if she forgets to water. She calls it plant therapy. I call it genius. I used to think talking to inanimate things meant you were losing it. Turns out, it means you're finding new ways to connect. When you live alone, you build relationships with your space. You don't just live in your house, you converse with it. And weirdly enough, it talks back. Not with words, of course, but with warmth, with familiarity, with a feeling that says, "Hey, you're not alone here." So yeah, talk to the toaster. Thank the fridge for keeping your cheese from sweating. Tell the door, "Don't squeak today, I've got company." It's not crazy, it's just company of a different kind. 10. You'll realize you're stronger than you ever gave yourself credit for. This one takes time. When you first start living alone, especially after a loss or a major life change, you don't feel strong. You feel untethered, like someone cut the last rope connecting you to something steady. The first few nights can be the hardest. Everything feels too quiet, too big, too much. But then, you wake up the next day, and the day after that. You take yourself to your appointments. You change that stubborn light bulb. You learn how to reset the Wi-Fi after 3 failed tries and a few muttered swear words, but hey, you did it. And somewhere in the middle of all that, you realize something. You're doing it. No fanfare, no parade, just you, figuring it out. One small victory at a time. I once met a gentleman named Morris, 75, former mechanic, lived alone since his wife passed 7 years earlier. He told me, "I didn't think I could do it. I thought I'd break without her. But now, every time I fix the leaky sink or cook myself a good dinner, I feel like I'm building something. Not a house, a life. My life." And that's it, isn't it? You don't just survive living alone. You become stronger, braver, more self-assured. You learn to be your own compass, your own cheerleader, your own safe place. So yeah, you might still cry on hard days. You might miss what once was. But you'll also look around and realize you're not who you used to be. you're stronger, you're wiser, and you're still here, living, learning, and maybe even thriving in your own way. So, maybe your fridge looks a little sad today. Maybe you just had a deep chat with your houseplant. Or maybe, for the first time in a long while, you're starting to enjoy your own company more than you ever expected. Here's what I'll tell you, friend. This path of living alone isn't always easy, but it's richer than people realize. It's where your quirks shine, your stories return, and your quiet strength starts to speak up. You become the kind of person who talks to their past, dresses for no one, and somehow still finds beauty in the rustle of leaves outside the window. And all of that? That's not weakness. That's wisdom showing up in sweatpants. If this video resonated with you or reminded you of someone in your life, go ahead and like, subscribe, and share it with a friend who might need a little encouragement today. And if you've discovered your own surprising truths about living alone, I'd love to hear them in the comments below. This channel is a space for real stories, real people, and real life after the world gets a little quieter. Until next time, keep talking to that toaster. You're not alone.